This is Stephanie Samuels, the director of Copline. I'm honored to be telling you about Copline, which is a 24-hour hotline that is completely confidential and is a non-rescue line for police officers. The line is answered by trained, well-vetted, retired peer listeners that deal with multiple psychosocial stressors that law enforcement officers and their families deal with. The lines are not just for crisis, but to have a person on the other end that gets it, whatever that it is, and helps the caller talk through the reasons that they called. We hold an annual golf tournament in Santee, California, and on New Year's Eve at midnight, the infamous 5K Run for the Call, which is done both in New Jersey as well as Carlsbad, but can be done virtually anywhere, even indoors on an elliptical or a stationary bike, so no excuses that you can't do it. These events help us raise much-needed funds for the lines, training, and advertising. We are always looking for new volunteers to help man these lines. If you are interested or want more information about Copline, please look us up on www.copline.org. And should you ever need to reach out, we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just the same hours that law enforcement works. And we can be reached at 1-800-267-5463. which is 1-800-COPLINE. Stay safe and know you're not alone.
Hi, this is Mike Cook, and welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This show is intended to help break the stigma of mental health issues among first responders. I know from personal experience how PTSD, depression, and addiction can take over your life while suffering in silence. I was a police officer for 19 years and spent the last 10 years of my career as an undercover narcotics detective. I didn't reach out because of fear, lack of trust, shame, and stigma. It took me losing it all before I got help. With a new perspective and passion for life, I can now help others find a way out. Working together with peer support, wellness units, and the mental health and recovery field, we can bring about positive change for the ones who protect us all. The guests on this show offer unique and valuable information, support, and experience, and are the voice for those waiting to be heard. Enjoy the show. Hi, welcome back to Positive Connections Radio. I am here today with former police chief who suffered from alcoholism during his career. He was able to stop drinking and enjoy the rest of his time in law enforcement, retire as chief, and live a life of sobriety for the past 25 years. Welcome, Rudy Escalante. How you doing? Thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I know that it's extremely important for the word to get out there that recovery is possible. And given your career and being in law enforcement and getting sober in law enforcement, I think it's really important to get it out there for people that are actually listening to this show, and they might be able to know that it's okay to ask for help and recovery is possible. Can you talk a little bit about your story?
Sure. As we know, the disease of addiction and alcoholism does not discriminate. It doesn't matter where we come from or what we do. In the rooms of recovery, there are people from all walks of life, all ages, and we all struggle with life issues and problems. When I was still a young patrol person, the way I would cope with situations was to utilize alcohol as a way of detaching from that pain. And it became a consistent way of managing solutions to the problems of having to deal with some of the things that we dealt with on a daily basis.
Right.
It was very challenging not to disclose that to anyone in fear of A, losing my job, and B, being perceived as somebody who was weak, or the inability to solve my own individual problems. As we all know, we get called on a daily basis to homes and to people's lives who are struggling from their own problems, and we have to solve them. And then we turn around and we struggle to manage our own personal problems. And it becomes a challenge. And so for me, alcohol became the solution. It started out as a social opportunity It turned into something that became very unmanageable. And so I had to reach outside and get some help from some professionals who understood what was going on in my mind.
What actually brought you to recovery and actually getting help?
I had a close friend of mine who I confided in and letting him know that how I was feeling, that I was concerned about myself. I wasn't a happy person internally. I tried to mask that by coming to work and participating in things where I felt like I was enjoying life. And I didn't understand why I was not happy. I was in a great situation with work. You know, I have a great family, and I wasn't depressed, but I was just struggling with dealing with life. And so I confided in a friend who was not in law enforcement, and they finally asked me, you know, if I felt like I had a drinking problem. And it was the first time I was able to get honest enough with someone that I trusted, right, and also was willing to go get some help. And so he later connected me with a family member of his who at the time had 7 years in sobriety, and introduced me to the program. I later reached out to a peer support specialist that was with the police department that I was working for at the time. And they connected me to a treatment facility called Beacon House, which is in Pacific Grove on the Monterey coast. I went to the Beacon House back in 1994, and I was there for a period of time. And then I learned new skills and new life skills and how to deal with social challenges, and realizing that I didn't have to be perfect, and that I wasn't abnormal. I was actually normal in regards to how I felt and how to approach life's situations. And as we know, in the field of law enforcement, we have to deal with some difficult situations that become very difficult on our minds. And it's not easy to get rid of it. And unfortunately, at an early age in my career, we learned how to manage that through alcohol.
And it was socially acceptable too, especially in law enforcement. It's almost, I remember it's almost expected that you drink. I didn't really trust anybody that actually didn't go out and have a couple beers.
Yeah, I mean, we got together after work almost on a daily basis, and, you know, would share some of the things where it was a way of decompressing, right, through the activities of the day. And that seemed normal to me. It was something that I had watched as I did ride-alongs when I was very interested in the career at early ages of 14. And so it was something that I aspired to be. I never saw the negative effects that alcohol does to a person emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And the things that we have to deal with, we have to figure a way out to process that. Right. Well, the only way to process that was to disconnect with it. And by drinking with my peers who understood what I was going through, or I could listen to them, what they were going through, that seemed like the appropriate solution.
And we trust our peers too, especially in law enforcement. We're talking, we're going to the same scenes, or we can understand, and no one else. I can remember the feeling like a separation at maybe year 5 or year 6, where, you know, my older friends that I had that weren't in law enforcement or any kind of first related field didn't really get what I was going through, and I really couldn't communicate with them. Not that it was like ultra secret. A lot of things we don't discuss to the general public, the emotional part of it and how it affected me. And I think alcohol was an unhealthy coping mechanism that I and many other people in law enforcement use to deal with these issues, get these emotions out, not appear weak because we're all basically under the influence and able to use the truth serum to get out. But I think that you hit on a very good subject or topic about what happened with you. You said you got honest, and then you had the willingness to get help. And those two things are very key, I believe, in starting to understand that recovery is possible for sure.
Yeah, in the career, we were expected to handle the particular call that we get sent on, and then we move on to the next one.
Right.
And we don't have an opportunity to really process the emotions that we experience from one call to the next. We're left with either stuffing those feelings, those emotions for another time until we feel like we are in a safe place to where we're not going to be judged. And that becomes a very dynamic situation in that it's a learned behavior that we continue to stomach until at some point in time we have to explore different outlets so that we can go home and manage our own personal lives.
Exactly. And dispatch isn't going to come on after the call and say, okay, you went 10-8. All right, well, why don't you come back to the station and process this? And when we're done there, then you can go out to the next call. A lot of cities and departments, it's call to call to call. And we don't really get to talk to another person about what's going on. And a lot of times, we shove it down. We sort of forget about it. I remember just sort of putting it in the background. That didn't really affect me. No, I'm strong. I can deal with it. But later on in life, years later, these little instances keep coming back in different forms. It brings me back to maybe the first time that really affected me where I thought it didn't.
Exactly.
So you got sober and you went back, you took a little bit of a break and you went back and you stayed sober for the last 25 years and then you retired as a chief.
That's correct. I was able to continue to work in the program, and I stayed with the sponsor or the person that I was introduced to, who helped me introduce myself to the program, and he continued to be my sponsor and still is today. It has been 25 years, and so at that time, I realized that I was able to participate in a more functional way in my life, and I had to go back to school and get my degrees.
Right.
Obviously, early on in my career, that was not a priority. Education was not a huge priority. But then I realized at some point in time that I wanted to promote. And so I eventually went back and I got my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and was able to work my way through the promotional process. A lot of it was through being blessed with great mentors and also humbling myself enough to not be afraid of asking questions and continuing to go to meetings and participate in the program. It also gave me a different perspective when handling real life situations in law enforcement. I was able to understand what people are going through that we were addressing who had alcohol issues or drug addiction issues. And I felt like I became a better officer, not only to my community, but to my peers. And I was able to communicate differently because I felt like I had more tools.
How was your peer interaction being sober as a police officer if they knew, what you had gone through or that you just quit drinking?
I was very fortunate. The chief at the time was very supportive of me getting help. I was not involved in any discipline issue that led up to me going into treatment. And so I was fortunate enough to say I needed some time off, and I explained why, and he was very supportive of the path that I was choosing and that I was asking for some help. And so without that support, I don't know where I would have been. So moving forward, he allowed me to take the time. And then when I came back, I didn't feel like I was going to be judged. I wasn't worried about what other people thought. And my sponsor was very supportive in that respect, and that I was nervous about going to meetings and who was I going to run into, right?
Right.
Was I going to run into people that I had arrested? And he reminded me, he said, you know what? He says, people in the rooms are going to reach out to you. And those that don't are really not experiencing recovery themselves. I was able to learn that my presence was actually going to not only help my recovery, but it was going to help theirs. And I always focused, and I did run into some people in the rooms, and they would ask me, gosh, what are you doing here?
Sure.
And I would tell them, I go, look, I'm no better than you, no worse.
Right.
I'm no stronger, no weaker. And I'm a human just like you. And I am here to get better just like you. And so now we have an opportunity to work together to get better.
Exactly. And I know that I had that fear also about, going to these meetings, didn't know anything about them. I never researched what they really were. And I'm talking about Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And I didn't like talk about it. I didn't really want to know about it. And the fear was there, and covering up the pain with alcohol was one thing. But the fear of being discovered that I had a problem and I'm supposed to be out there to help other people, that could be enormous and overwhelming.
Once I admitted it to myself and admitted it to somebody else and was willing to get help, that's when I felt an amazing part of the relief. I kind of felt like I had opened the door, stepped through the threshold, and was experiencing a life bigger than I could imagine. So the amount of relief that I got from that action, there was less fear about going to the meetings, because I was already feeling better and understanding that my thought process of how to deal with situations was not correct. I was not educated on how to deal with emotions and feelings and difficult situations and express fear. And I didn't understand how ego and pride was affecting me. So once I started to get more tools on how to better deal with life and life's issues, I wasn't as fearful about going into the rooms and being discovered, because I was there to continue to get better. And I wasn't going to let anybody stop me from that path. And what I discovered was that people were actually more supportive. That fear and that worry that I had never materialized, because those who were actually really trying to recover themselves were very supportive of my presence.
And most of the time, they don't really care what you do for a living. That's not one of the very first questions that they ask you. It's just you give out what you need to give out. But it is a personal program of recovery, even though you're in a community, in a group of people with the same common purpose, is to remain sober and to pass it on to someone else. And you must have been it's been such a role model for even your peers and even supervisors during this time. Did you ever have anybody come up to you and ask you about sobriety?
I did, and it was my choice to share with them or not, or share with them how much that I wanted to disclose.
Exactly.
And they were all very supportive. But I have to say this, the people in the rooms, I never felt like I had been judged.
Right.
And I had more worry about what other people were talking about in the workplace than I had any worry about what people were saying in the rooms. I didn't have to hide about it in the rooms. In the rooms, if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, aren't you a cop?"
Yeah.
One of my responses to them was, "What does that have to do with what we're here for right now?
Exactly.
What does that have to do with recovery?" And they would look at me, and I remember one person that said, "Absolutely nothing. Glad you're here." I go, "So am I. I'm glad I'm here too, and I'm glad you're here." And it never became another discussion topic.
And I think that's so important too. Yeah, around the station, around your other peers, that there's going to be one or two that just don't get it or don't want to get it, and they have judgment. And we're sort of trained that way. I mean, we use a lot of judgments out in the field, and even profiling. Everybody profiles, no matter if you're a cop or not. We profile people, and it depends what we do with that. In recovery, I found that it doesn't make a difference what other people think about me.
In our career of law enforcement, our judgment and our evaluation of people and situations, those are survival skills. Do we go up on that car? Do we go into that building? Yeah, there's technical aspects of the job that teach us how to be safe, but we also rely on our experience and our instincts that tell us, based on how we're judging something or how we perceive something, that is a danger zone. And so those become survival skills for us.
Yes.
And we carry those over into our daily lives outside of work. And that mounting pressure over time, we have to deal with that pressure, sometimes in not so healthy ways.
Right.
But in the rooms, I don't have to worry about that. I've never had to worry about it once. Nobody has ever presented a situation to me where I felt like that needed to happen. But the nice thing about in the area where I live, there's hundreds of meetings a week that I can choose to go to or not.
Yes.
And there are some meetings that probably are less intrusive for somebody in our profession than others. But I've also found that going to meetings of all walks of life not only gives me a sense of gratitude and appreciation, but I also give somebody else hope.
Right. And the hope is a huge part of getting help and staying in the moment, but also the meetings. There's also meetings out there, and a lot of people don't know that there are meetings specific just for first responders, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, dispatchers, and their public safety fellowships, and they're AA groups, but they're closed off just for first responders.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that I was 24 years sober before I finally heard that there were other meetings like that.
I know, that's amazing. It's amazing. I when you told me that, I'm like, are you serious? And it was, because when I was a cop, that was the last thing. I never heard about it until, everything happened and I got sober. I'm like, wow, there's actually meetings just for law enforcement. And walking into the door, that's why we started one here. We have 2 in San Diego County. And a lot of guys never heard about recovery or have their own opinion about what it is. And it's a way to connect. Not only are we here for the same reason of remaining sober, but also we have similar backgrounds. So we relate, and we could talk about these things without having to drink over it.
Exactly. And I'm looking at starting a meeting in my area, and I know there's at least 5 or 6 people that I used to work with that are willing to participate.
Oh, that's great.
And we have great peer support around our area in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah.
And I just hope that we at some point can start a meeting here. But I have also felt that the meetings that I go to, I've never felt judged.
Yeah.
I've never felt like I could not go there. And I've never felt as though my career would interfere with my opportunity for recovery.
And if you want to start a meeting, we'll get together later on and I'll give you all the information I have on how to do it. It's very easy. If you have a safe location and, a couple things, and it's just basically an AA meeting, but you have it at a different location, and it's not open to the general public. So it's great. The meeting that we started here in Encinitas was for the first maybe 7 months. Either I was alone all night with the meeting, or I had one guy that was going to the meeting in downtown San Diego. It's been around for 35 years. So, and then about 8 months into it, we started picking up. People started recognizing, and people started coming out and walking in the front doors, which is a huge blessing. And you made a great point earlier too about how you actually went out on yourself and got help without it being forced upon you during any kind of disciplinary actions, because that does change things a lot. And actually noticing an issue or a problem with drinking, it could be with pills, it could be with a lot of different things, and trusting someone in peer support. If you have a real strong peer support team, or you want one, that is crucial, where you can actually come to someone, or maybe even someone that is not even related to law enforcement, and speak your truth, and then really want to get help and get honest with yourself and somebody else is very important.
Yeah, everybody has their own story. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. That is a tradition that I strongly believe in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
Nothing in there says that we have to go to jail or be in trouble at work, or lose a family or a job or something financially. Are those parts of people's stories? Yes, but those are not requirements to join the rooms. There's only one requirement, and that is a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't say that we have to drink this much or drink this. It doesn't even say that you drink every day. Now, my situation was that I did, and it got to a point where, every day I got off work or every day that I was on my day off, I was drinking at some point.
Right.
And that's not normal. And so for me, it was, how do I get some help and some relief, because this is not working for me. I did not want to drink anymore, but I got to a point where I was drinking every day and couldn't stop. I couldn't go somewhere and say, no, I'm going to have water tonight.
Right.
That it became just such a normal, a mental obsession that I was thinking about that. What are we going to do tonight, and where are we going, and who's all going to join us? I was very judgmental in who I felt attended the rooms of AA, and I realized that I had no clue, and that it was not the consistent inebriate person that we arrested 3 times a week for public intoxication. People in the rooms were from all areas of life, all ages, all courses of employment, and they were there with one common goal, and all they cared about from me was to be there for them as well. And they didn't ask for anything else.
Yeah, no one's above or immune from alcoholism at all. No one's above it. So yeah, you'll meet some people that are, CEOs, businessmen, to people that just are, fresh out of college or before college. It's just, there's a whole range of people that actually go to these type of meetings, not just the inebriate or the drunk that's off the street that we've been dealing with for years.
Now, one thing that I did do, which I felt was very helpful, and some people gave me some suggestions, was I never discussed my job or my work in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. To me, that was outside issues that I could seek professional counseling for if needed.
Yeah.
But what I did do, and I respected the rooms by talking about things that affected me and my drinking.
Right.
And what the solution was. So I wasn't walking in there and say, hey, I went to this domestic violence call today, or I went to a SIDS death today. I had the choice to decide how to disclose things if I felt like I needed to. Yeah, with my sponsor, with him and I, absolutely, I would tell him, things that would happen at work and how it affected me. And I utilized that.
Right.
But when I went to meetings, it was not an opportunity to dump all my work stuff there, because not everybody understands what I was going through. And I don't understand everything that maybe a doctor or a lawyer or a therapist might be going through who's seeking recovery in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Exactly.
So that's not the appropriate time to share those things. But I do know that all the things that led me to where I am, I needed a place to share that and share my experience and my strengths and my hopes, which helped me realize that I was not perfect. I was not different or unique like I thought I was. I was, just like anybody else.
And we are. That's true. And so I know that you have to get out of here in a little bit. So what happened? So you were able to retire as a chief, and what happened after that, getting out of law enforcement?
Yeah, so I retired in 2016. I spent nearly 32 years. It was a terrific opportunity, and I miss some of the people. I know the work is very challenging in today's society, and I pray for all of our law enforcement and public safety servants, because it is a very difficult job. I then started working for a drug and alcohol treatment facility. I'm a chief executive officer, and still learning a lot of the ins and outs and intricacies of providing drug and alcohol treatment.
Right.
I have to understand insurance billing, insurance contracting, grants. They're similar to that in public safety, but they're a little bit different. And, understanding drug Medi-Cal in California and how that billing process works, electronic health records.
Yeah, that is
documenting
a whole different
progress notes, certifications are different.
Right.
So it's been a huge transition, and working in nonprofit world, that's very difficult fiscally as well, trying to find consistent revenue. So There are enormous challenges.
Do you want to give a shout out to where you work at? I mean, if you want to, that's totally fine.
Yeah, you know, I work for Janus of Santa Cruz, and they do some great work. We have some terrific staff members. They're very supportive and committed to providing services to our clients. It's an amazing opportunity to watch the work that they do. And most of the staff know me because I've lived in Santa Cruz County all of my life, and so it's no big secret, but I also don't promote it either.
Right.
But people do know that I am very supportive of programs and opportunities for people to get treatment in regards to their drug and alcohol addiction.
Exactly. And maybe and if you had any first responders come contact you and maybe actually trust you to go get help.
Yeah, over the years, I've had the opportunity to talk to a few folks and be supportive. It was always difficult when I was in my role as chief, because sitting in that chair, there is a certain responsibility. And so there were opportunities where people asked if they could talk to me outside of work. And as I said, you know, as long as it doesn't involve being a mandated reporter,
right,
or anything of that nature, then we can talk. And if it's around getting them into treatment, that's fine. And so I had a few, but there are still some folks that feel as though management is always with other alternatives. And I think around drug and alcohol addiction, that's not necessarily so.
No, because we all suffer from something, and that's the common feeling. A lot of us do hold that if we do say something to our superiors or even our partners, that a word's going to get out, and then we might miss opportunities, and that's what keeps a lot of us sick and in our disease and in that suffering. And then a lot of us end up retiring or quitting and disappearing, and we lose a sense of our identity too once we stop becoming what we were doing before in law enforcement. I'm so glad that you're on this show, and I want to respect your time. I know you have to get out of here. Anything else, Chief, that you want to talk about or say to anybody listening here?
No, I really want to thank you for the opportunity, but I do want to say that those who are in the law enforcement or public safety profession who may be suffering from drug or alcohol addiction, first off, you're not alone. Secondly, you're not a bad person. You're normal, and we all have things that we need to work through, and there is a solution other than using drugs or alcohol, and that I found that I can actually be a better partner, a better boss, a better peer, a better father, a better son to my mom, and I thoroughly enjoy that. I also know that I remember thinking, I'm not going to be any fun anymore, or I'm not going to enjoy the job or life anymore because I'm not going to have alcohol in my life. And that is absolutely false.
Exactly.
I thoroughly enjoy it. In fact, I have been able to participate in more activities and more opportunities being sober than I did when I was drinking.
Imagine that. You know, there is life after, there's life in sobriety and after drinking. You can have fun, and there's so many more things that you can do in life that you can't do when you're always worried about where you're going to get your next drink from.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Rudy. And stay on the line. I'll talk to you in a little second when I hang up. And everybody else listening, I'll talk to you next time. What a great show, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Positive Connections Radio, in affiliation with Mental Health News Radio. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time, be strong, stand up, speak your truth, and break the stigma.